Hello guys, welcome to the tutorial of Pixel Perfect LED software. Now this software is only available for Mac at this point. So let's get some introduction to our features. We're going to go ahead and launch our Pixel Perfect LED. And as you can see, it opens up with two windows. We have a preset window here, and we have a Pixel Perfect LED window here. Now the presets stores all of your presets. These are all pre-programmed presets that we have added for one company. If you like to add your own screens in there, please give us a list of all the screens with their details and we can totally add them in for you. And as you can see, it scrolls down and there's way more options down below as well for any kind of grids you might want, any kind of lines, cross, circles. You can also save and open presets. If you want to delete a preset for whatever reason, you can also select it and delete it off down here by clicking on the minus key. I'm going to leave that alone for now. Now let's look at our main window, which is going to be what we're going to be using most of the time. So on the left top side right here in the white border, as you can see, that's our raster preview. Now this preview is not pixel to pixel due to your screen size. You might not be able to do that. So we've kept this scalable, and then you have your parameters right underneath that, all of which you'll be using on every single one of your screens, every single one of your layers. Right side, we have our layer window. So as you add more screens, they're going to populate into each slot, and then this again becomes a sliding list of all of your layers. Right below that, we have a few very important buttons, which is plus, which gives you access to add more screens or images, and then we also have a future plan, which we'll reveal later. And then you can close out of that by clicking on cancel. You can also delete your multiple layers if you have them. You always must have at least one layer available in there, so if I try to delete this, it's not going to let me. If you have any projects that you're working on that you have saved previously and you want to open it, you would go to open project and browse for your project. It will be .rdl file. Again, there's also file open project from right here as well. You can browse through open project there. Then you have save project. Now when you save a project, it saves everything, your full parameters, your full layers, and it is a very small file, but it keeps all that information intact in there at the state where you saved it. If you ever need to change the product, or if you need to change the screen configuration, it's just much easier to have that project file saved and just work on that, as it makes your life a million times easier. Then you have save PNG file. As we know, most of the media servers use a PNG file to import as a picture, and which we can project onto our LED screens or projection or whatever that may be onto the surface and see pixel to pixel ratio on there. Right next to that, we have a save PSD file. PSD file is a Photoshop file. Those of you who are familiar with it, it's Adobe Photoshop format, where you can save all of your layers and you can edit the layers, but you cannot change the configuration of the screen, nor can you change any parameters of the screen itself. But you can definitely add more text layers, you can add masking layers, all that stuff in the Photoshop if you have a complex screen that you would want to work with. Now we're going to look at example of simple screen configuration. Let's look at our center screen. We have a stage with 3 screens. This is the center screen, which is going to be 5 high by 13 wide. Each panel is 80 pixels high by 80 pixels wide. We have a stage right screen, which is 5 high by 10 wide. Each panel is 80 pixels high by 80 pixels wide again. And we have a stage left screen, which is also 5 high by 10 wide. Each panel again is 80 by 80. Alright, let's look at our example of pixel map. As we saw, we have 3 screen configuration. One is 5 by 13, which is our center screen. The other 2 screens are 5 by 10s. There's multiple ways to add screens in here. So we're going to get started with the first one. So as you see, we have one layer that's already opened up, and that is already 80 by 80. So if you needed to change that, here's where you would change those parameters. But since our example is 80 by 80, I'm going to leave that as is. Now, our first screen for the center screen, this is supposed to be 5 by 13. So, which is 13 columns wide, 5 columns high. There you go, you already have your screen made on the preview monitor there. Your horizontal start and vertical start. If you need these features, or if you need to use the horizontal vertical start, this is of course pixel to pixel, so you can type in 100 pixels and it will shift 100 pixels in from the x coordinate 0, 0. And I'm going to bring it down 50 pixels, just so you guys can see it. Now this is a checkbox where you can enable the background color, and you can select your colors. I'm going to select in blue color. I like that. Okay. Right underneath that we have an outline box. If you check that, you can see outline popping on and off. Right now it's set to 1 pixel. Of course you can change this to whatever you like. I'm going to go ahead and show you 5 pixels wide. You can also change the colors on this. If you want to make it poppy, select some bright color. I'm going to go ahead and put it back to 1 pixel because that's what I want. This way it gives you a pixel border around every single one of your cabinets. Then right underneath that we have a circle and a crosshatch. So you can enable, disable that if you need it. This is of course very useful when you're trying to check and make sure your aspect ratio is good. The circle is a circle and not an oval, not an egg. Of course you can change colors on that like we did with everything else. I'm going to go ahead and change it to red. You can also change the size of the thickness on that lines. So as you can see, as I make this number bigger, it gets bigger. If I make that number smaller, so smaller. I like 4, and that's where it's defaulted at in the program. So we're going to keep it at that. Then you have your XY offset right below that. If you do your XY offset, this is your text size and this is your color. Again, the same concept applies. If you want to change the color, just go ahead and click on it and pick your color. Once you change your offset, let's say from 50 I went to 25, as you can see on the screen, it automatically changes that for you. You don't have to do anything else, which is a great advantage of this software. Right underneath XY offset, we have a screen size label. Now what this stands for is the actual size of the pixel to pixel of the entire screen cabinet configuration. So if I check that, and I'm going to type in 50 here as well for my text size, and as you can see we have a width of 1040 by height of 400 pixels. Of course you can change color on this as well if you need to, and I'm going to leave it at that. We have a layer name right here right next to that. Now this layer name, as you can see, is printing on top of the screen as well as in your layers. On the top of your layers you have layer 0 written right there. This gets much easier to identify which screen layer you're working with when you have multiple screens open. I'm going to go ahead and change this layer 0 to stage, or sorry, this is going to be our upstage center. I'm going to leave this at that for now, and we're going to look at the other features in the later tutorials. I'm going to go ahead and add our stage right or stage left screen. Now there's 2 ways of adding the screen. The easier way, of course, is if you already have the presets in the preset window, which I can see I have an X7B that is 80 high by 80 wide, and it's right now in configuration of 5 by 3. I'm going to go ahead and move that in. Just drag that into your layers on the program itself. And as you can see, I have the screen sitting on the background as it's sitting on a back layer. So this layer is, of course, the higher it is, the higher priority it gets. Exactly how it works in a Photoshop if you've ever worked with layers. So as this is in the background, we're going to change the configuration first. So we have 80 by 80. And we're supposed to be 10 columns wide, and we're supposed to be 5 columns tall, or 5 rows tall. And I'm gonna move this on the vertical offset. As you can see, I can't leave it there because it's hiding most of the screen. And for pixel mapping, of course, you need to see all your layers. So I'm gonna leave it at 0 on the horizontal axis. On the y-axis, as our height is 400 and we are 25 tall, that's 425. To be safe, I'm gonna just do it at 500. There we go. So we can see the entire screen here. Again, the same concept applies. If you want to change the color, just click on the color. I'm going to make this one pink and purple. Alright, I like that shade of purple. I like the outline, I like the circle. I'm going to leave those alone. I'm going to add the XY offset, and I'm also going to add the screen name. I'm going to type in the size of the text that I want to see here. And this layer name, we're going to change this to stage right. So that looks good. If you want to add another screen, we can click on a plus sign like I showed earlier, and we're going to select a screen. Now that screen is added right here at 0, 0 again. And we're going to change that again, 10 columns wide by 5 columns tall. Horizontal and vertical offset. So now this time I want the horizontal offset because I can't be at the same place as where stage right is sitting. Let's say I want to be right next to it. That one, stage right, is 800 pixels wide, so I'm going to go 900 pixels. And vertically, I'm going to keep it at the same level at 500 pixels. And that looks pretty good to me for location. I'm going to change the colors to green. Alright, I'm going to leave the outline, I'm going to leave the circle, I'm going to add the XY offset, I'm going to add the screen label size and the size itself, and we're going to call this stage left. Now at this point, you can save your project if you're happy with it. If you want to add a background image, this is how we do a background image. You just click on a plus sign, select the image file. So I have some background image here. Alright, so that's what I want in my background. And as you can see, it's on a second layer sitting here, which means we can see our first layer, but we cannot see our bottom 2 layers. Simply just drag that layer down and click on refresh. Once you refresh it and select your image file, you can see your raster height and width is 1920 by 1080. You can change the size of the image file here. So if I was to make this 1000 pixels wide, it's going to scale that image to only 1000 pixels wide. I'm going to put that back to 1920. I'm going to add one more layer of my logo. I'm going to bring in a logo file. I'm going to click on the images, and I have my logo saved up right here. And as you can see, it's sitting again on the second layer, which is right behind our first layer. So it's kind of hard to see, and I'm going to offset this. I like the size of the logo where it's at. If you need to change the size, you can change it right up here in the panel height, panel width, because it changes each picture as a panel. And I don't want to add a repeating function, that's why the column and the rows disappear. Now for the offset, I would like it right up here and somewhere in the empty area, right next to the upstage center. And we know our screen width is 1040 and we are at 100 offset, so we're right around 1200 pixels, so I'm going to select 1300. And that looks good at a horizontal level. At a vertical level, I want to bring it down about 100 pixels. And if I'm happy with that, great. If not, if I want to change the size, I can change it right up here. I'm going to make that 400. I'm going to make this 180 to keep my aspect ratio the same. And there you go. that looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna go ahead and save this as a PNG file, and we'll save this as example1. Save. I'm gonna also save a PSD file as example1, and I'm also going to save my project file as example1. Now to show you all the files that we have saved, right here we have example1.png, .psd, and .rdl. Of course, PNG is PNG file, PSD is a Photoshop file, and we have RDL, which is a project file. I'm going to go ahead and close this program out, and we have our example.rdl here. I'm going to go ahead and double click my RDL file. It opens up in the program, and if you need to change anything at this point in here. Now we're going to look at example of test pattern. If you wanted to create some test patterns to be able to tag it much easily, that's what this section is about. Let's get started. Test pattern feature was designed to number every cabinet, so when the LED techs are tagging a problem, it's kind of hard to see and count how many panels into the screen you have a problem at. So this was designed to make that problem go away pretty much. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of this stuff that I don't need for the test pattern. Of course, you can keep it on if you like. You don't have to. It just makes it a little bit more cluttery. So right here we have a print panel labels. Print panel label function is great, especially if you are trying to tag the screens again. If not, this feature might not be that useful to you. So again, we have a color selection here. You can select whatever color you like. I'm gonna keep it pink. I'm gonna go to the other screen now. Again, do the same thing, take off the circle, take out the XY offset. I'm going to add a print panel label. I'm going to change this size to 50 just so you can see it. I'm going to leave that at black. I'm going to go to the pink screen now, our stage right screen. Also going to do the same thing. And we're going to make this white this time. And I'm going to save this at 50. So at this point, you can go ahead and do your save PNG file. I'm going to do this example 2. Save project file. I don't see a need of saving a PSD file for everything, but if you want to, you can totally do it. And as we can see right here, this is pixel to pixel, so when you map this screen and throw this test pattern on, this should line up perfectly fine. In this next section, we're going to look at example of data flow diagrams. I'm just going to open up our example 2 that we just saved earlier. Alright, so we have our example 2 that opens up. Let's start with upstage center screen. So I'm going to uncheck our print panel label, and I'm going to check the box right here on the right bottom side that says enable data path. And as you can see, as soon as I did that, data path came up. The 655,000 pixels per port is very common for especially Novastar products. If you're using Linson, if you're using DBStar, Aoto, Dektronics, any LED products pretty much can be used in this data flow patterns. The only thing you have to change is your data pixel limits, which is different of course from manufacturer to manufacturer, but most of them are somewhere between 550,000 range to 650,000. Novastar is 655,000 pixels. The exact number is 655,360, but to be a little safe, we go with 655,000. You have 8 available options here with the selectable button right next to it. So as you change this and select it, your data patterns up there are of course changing with it as well. Green is where your port starts, the green arrow. The red arrow is where your port stops, according to the limit. If the limit was, let's say, 100,000, Right now, as we can see, it's running through the entire screen, so we only need one forward signal, one return signal if you're doing a backup, or up port, down port, as you would say. I'm going to put in a limit for 100,000 pixels here. And as you can see now, that divided up into 5 ports almost. So this limit is very helpful to have. Of course, you should know your pixel limits for your processor that you're going to be using, so this is very accurate. And if possibly, let's say you can do 5.5 columns according to your pixel limits, we round it down to 5 columns, so that way your data ends at the bottom or top of the column, or at either one of the end of the screen. So that way you're not having to find and troubleshoot where your second data is starting in the middle of the screen. This feature was added again to make our lives much easier. If you do need to change that and want to drive it to the maximum amount of pixels, we can definitely change that for you. For common purposes, we're going to leave it to be simple as possible for users. Alright, we're going to go ahead and do our stage left. Again, I'm going to uncheck my print panel labels, check my enable data path, and I'm going to try to stay with the same pattern throughout my screens, so that way it's just much easier for the LED text and the stage hands to follow these patterns and without thinking about it. I can enable the data path, I can uncheck my print label, but on this one I'm going to show you keeping the print label on. Let's say you wanted to see both of your data panels, or sorry, your data path as well as your print labels. So I'm just going to decrease the size of the text here so you can actually see it. That already looks pretty decent there, where neither of the two features are in each other's way, so this works out perfect actually. And I'm going to change my outline to some other color. And that's it. Once you're done, again, the same procedure applies. You want to save whatever format you want. I'm going to save this as example 3. I'm going to save the project as example 3 as well. And there you have it. This is just the introduction to how to do simple screen. We will come up with some more tutorials in the near future for you to do some very exciting advanced screens in here. We've made an example 4 here. As you can see, I have multiple different products, multiple different screens, and multiple different layers here on the right hand side. And just having the labels up here just makes it way easier to work with all these layers. You know exactly which screen you're selecting. You know exactly what colors you're working with, because it gives you a little bit of preview of that screen as well with the colors, and also gives you the configuration of the tiles that you have there.